Hello, good night. Welcome to Legalize This 26th day of October 2025. Tonight we have with us Mr. Arley Gill, attorney at law, and Dr. Francis Alexis, King's Counsel. And tonight we are going to look at the difficult the issue of the present request being made to the Grenada government, both as regards the views of substantive response and also procedural issues. But before we get into tonight's program, I just want to recognize those who sponsor this program: Gel Professional Solutions Inc., Gem FM carrying this program on FM radio out in Canada, and also Grenada Technical Allied Workers Union, GTAL.
Attention all workers, your health and safety at work are critical. At Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, we are dedicated to ensuring you have a safe and secure work environment. If you encounter unsafe conditions or are involved in an accident, take immediate actions. Report it to the company, your shop steward, and make sure it reaches your union. Your health and safety is a priority, and a strong union means a strong voice for your rights. Don't wait. Address concerns right away and protect your well-being. For a safer workplace and a better quality of life, stand with the Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. Together, we can create a safer, healthier work environment for everyone.
So welcome back. And tonight, my co-host, usual co-host, is not here. He's unavailable for tonight, but we have Dr. Alexis and we have Arley Gill, Mother Arley Gill with us. And I just want us to, at this time, keep in mind the people of the other Caribbean islands, Haiti, Dominican Republic, and in particular Jamaica, who are facing what many describe as a monster storm, monster hurricane by the name of Melissa. Also, this is the month of October. It's the 42nd anniversary of the most difficult period in the history of our country, certainly modern times. And what we are going to discuss tonight bring back to many, in fact, some before, to the issues that we now face as echoes from 42 years ago. So this is the context in which we will discuss this matter. We are, those of us on the program, at least we are 42 years older. The nation is 42 years older. And I think based on the experiences as a nation we have gone through and the lessons we have acquired as a people, we can approach. We are not the decision makers, but hopefully the decision makers can draw on what the lessons and the experience from the past. So good night, Brother Ali. Good night, Dr. Alexis, once again. And
Thank
Dr.
you very much indeed, Ewart, for having
Thank
me.
you very much and good night.
Your program is a standard bearer for discussion on issues, national, regional, and international. It is a leading discussion forum. So keep up the good work.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and allow me to echo the same sentiment that Dr. Alexis just noted. It's very important that we have a forum like this in Grenada, based in Grenada, where we can discuss, current issues, current topics. Sometimes in mainstream media, we do not have these discussions. So allow me to once again applaud you on this initiative.
Thank you very much. I think I can say, as I saw on another program, said the host was saying that the program is not for clicks, but for fruitful and deep discussion. So I'm really glad that we are fulfilling that mandate. Uh, Brother Ali, you are a member of the Coalition for Zone of Peace, for ensuring that the Caribbean region remains a zone of peace. Can you tell us what is this coalition, who forms it, what is the mandate of the coalition, and what activities have been undertaken thus far?
Thank you very much. And allow me to begin by echoing what you have said. At this time, our thoughts and prayers are with our fellow Caribbean citizens in Haiti and Santo and the Dominican Republic, and also Haiti, and also Jamaica, sorry, where Hurricane Melissa seems to be heading there. Monstrous hurricane. It is estimated that by the time it reaches landfall in Jamaica, it may very well be a Category 4 hurricane, worse than Gilbert and Ivan and Beryl that Jamaica has experienced in recent times. So our thoughts and prayers are with our brothers and sisters in those countries, and we hope for the very best. Is this the coalition for the zone of peace is really and truly a coming together of civil society groupings, trade unions, academics, political parties, and like-minded Grenadians who are of the belief, who subscribe to the philosophy and the principles of the zone of peace. The zone of peace, a principle first stated by Dr. Eric Williams, that we in the Caribbean, we treasure
We seem to have lost you for a while, a minute, Ali. We lost him for a while. So, Doc, I don't know if you want to. I know your anger, in particular, is that, as an old Chinese saying goes, we should not lose the opportunity of a crisis. The opportunities offered by a crisis for advancement. Ali, you back with us?
Yes, I'm back with you. I'm hearing you loud and clear. So, as I was saying, this coalition for the zone of peace, and I must say to you that as convener, I've written to the new National Party, the National Democratic Congress, the Chamber of Commerce, Conference of Churches, and we do have leaders of different faiths, Pastor Stanford Simon, Pastor King, and so all on board with us. And what we're about, we're apolitical in the sense that this is not a political organization. In other words, we're not for NNP, we're not for NDC, we're not for any partisan political interest. As I've indicated, we have invited the two major political parties. We have also invited the movement to be part of this initiative. The idea is to advocate, sensitize the national populace with regards to this principle of the zone of peace, to share with them the origin of that philosophy and principle, and to say to them, say to our fellow countrymen and women, that this is the history. not only within the Caribbean and the CARICOM region, but also Latin America. This is a principle that former Prime Minister Maurice Bishop have addressed in the United Nations and so on. And it really has to do with state actors so that we make the distinction. Of course, in each and every one of CARICOM society, we deal with the issues of crimes and criminal activities. And that is not what we speak of when we speak of the zone of peace. When we speak of the zone of peace, we speak about state action between states with regards to military aggression in the region. And we know our history. We were, as colonies in the World War II and so on, military bases were set up in the Caribbean, and many of our Caribbean men in particular, in one way or the other, played some role with regards to quote unquote the mother country at this time. But post-independence, we have largely remained and we have established the zone of peace. We are friends of all nations and satellites of none. Apart from the US invasion of Grenada in 1983, 42 years ago, we have not had military aggression in the English-speaking Caribbean, and that is a track record that we're extremely proud of. So, with regards to our mandate is for advocacy and for education of our populace with regards to the principle of the zone of peace. Advocacy to the government, to say to them that, to say to our government that we are supporting them, we are urging them to say no to the request, first of all, for the installation of a military-grade radar on the Maurice Bishop International Airport. And secondly, there's also another issue with regards to third-party deportees being sent to Grenada. And that request, as we understand it, has been made to the government. We have not heard much from the government on that issue, and we want to encourage the government to enlighten us as to that particular request and what discussions have been held thus far. And I say that against the backdrop of appreciating that we know that diplomacy between states, there's an element of secrecy, of course. We do not expect the government to say to us everything that they discuss with their colleagues in other states. But at the same time, transparency in democracy requires information to the population. And as such, these uncharted waters that we are called upon in this moment in history, our government approach is extremely important with regards to keeping the populace abreast and allaying our fears. And we of the coalition, we are urging the government to sensitize the population, first and foremost, and also to in weighing the interest. On a scale, we understand that pressure is put on the government to make that decision. And and as I said in other forum, we do not want to speculate as to what is being asked of Grenada if you say no or if you say yes. Because speculation, of course, can simply just lead to heightened fear. We do not know exactly what the US is saying to Grenada if we say no, but we are saying that the government at the same time have an obligation to inform the population, but consistent with the established and cherished principles that has been established by our forefathers with regards to the zone of peace. We believe that the government should say no to the request made of it by the United States of America. So I would leave that there, Mr. Chair, as my opening remark.
Yeah, but let me just ask a follow-up question. Beyond principle, what other considerations should be taken on board in terms of the government deciding which direction to move in?
Excellent. So that for one, this decision, the decision of the government, is not just a decision that will impact Grenada. It will also impact our standing within the CARICOM region. So it has regional implications and, of course, international implications. Because as part of CARICOM, first of all, as part of the OECS Charter, which speaks to the harmonization of foreign policy, we have heard Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit today speaking on the issue of maintaining the zone of peace. We've heard from Prime Minister Gaston Brown in Antigua about a week ago. Both Prime Ministers of the OECS subgrouping speaking to the issue of zone of peace. And we have heard from Prime Minister Mia Mottley. We have also heard read a statement of former prime ministers across the Caribbean, with our own former Prime Minister Tillman Thomas adding his voice to it and speaking with regards to the principle of zone of peace. So that, one, the impact on CARICOM, Caribbean solidarity, Latin American solidarity, and our standing within the CARICOM and OECS grouping. That's one aspect. Secondly, the issue of trade. We have witnessed that, imagine the Ukraine-Russia conflict and how much it has impacted the price of goods and trade here in Grenada. Could you imagine having a conflict right in our doorstep? How would it impact trade of goods, the price of goods? Then the other issue of our fisherfolk. Already we know we share maritime space, for instance, with Venezuela. Yes? Our boundary, maritime boundary, has not yet been delimited. But I can say to you, that as someone that follows the fishing industry, our fishermen that goes out 6 and 7 days at a time, they do fish very close to Venezuelan waters and so on. And the impact, already, fishermen are fearful with regards to how far they go in that particular area. So it will affect the fishery or fishing industry. It will impact trade, not to mention tourism. Tourism, as a lifeblood of our economy, relies heavily on security and stability in our region. Now, we in the Caribbean, we have witnessed what instability and militarization and conflicts would have caused in Africa and Asia and even Europe. And we have been fortunate thus far to have a certain level of peace and security and so on, where visitors can come to our shores and feel safe. Now, if we were to have a military conflict and a mere militarization of our waters, we know today that the biggest aircraft carrier in the world has docked at the port of our closest neighbor, Trinidad. And that is unprecedented. Trinidad, yes, it has a defense force, but Trinidad, by no stretch of the imagination, is a world power, world military power. And they're having some military exercise with regards to narco trafficking and so on. And that is an issue, as I guess we continue to discuss tonight, we can go into. So to answer your question succinctly, one, the impact it will have on our standing in the OECS and our CARICOM region to begin with, and the solidarity with other countries in our space, and also the CELAC region, meaning Caribbean, Latin American region. Economically, how it impacts trade, how it impacts fishing and the tourism sector, and the instability that it will create in Grenada and the rest of the region in terms of our economic activities. one cannot see no reasonable benefit, frankly, with militarization and military conflict in our space in the Southern Caribbean, where Grenada is in the middle of it. So we continue to advocate and to call for a zone of peace. We believe that any dispute can be resolved through dialogue, resolved through diplomacy, and we continue to maintain that our country must, or our government must continue to stand on the principle of neutrality, sovereignty, and self-determination of all nations, principles that are enshrined in the United Nations Convention that was established in December 1948.
But I think one may ask, we don't have any control as to whether the conflict will escalate or not. And if we were to say no, and the conflict goes ahead, the impacts, for example, you speak about on trade and the economy and so, will it be any different?
But, and you're right, we have no control. We are, as old people say, cockroach in front of all, right? We cannot speak to and dictate to what mighty and great military powers can do. But what we can be assured of is that we must play no part, no role in urging, encouraging, or in facilitating any military conflict. Yes, we cannot dictate or say to the United States or say to which other military power not to do A, B, and C. But what we can do is to continue to advocate for peace, continue to make ourselves available. About a month ago, I believe I saw a release from the government of Grenada, making itself available to be interlocutors to facilitate discussion between Venezuela and the United States. And that call has now been broadened by CARICOM leaders who continue to emphasize that they are prepared to use the good offices of CARICOM to ensure that some sort of dialogue or discussion is held between Venezuela and the United States in this particular case. As Prime Minister Mia Mottley put succinctly, she noted that all wars come to an end by way of dialogue. So why is it we cannot have the dialogue before the war even gets started? So although we are not in a position to say to the US and to say to the US to cease and desist from the militarization of our waters in the Caribbean, we must be seen and heard not to be playing any role to encourage, to facilitate any militarization or military aggression between any states. That's as much as we can do.
One last question before I ask Dr. Kobe. Given the realities of the world now, one may say, or some have said, that it is probable that a no answer could lead to sanctions and tariffs and so against Grenada. Is that a consideration? A, and B, if it is, how should it be addressed?
Good. And I will answer you this way. As I indicated, I do not want to be the bearer of speculations. As I said, I don't know for sure what is on the table. In fact, no one outside of the realm of government in Grenada knows what's happening. And I do not want to speculate. I heard talk about visas being revoked. Grenadians will not get visas. I heard talk about remittances. I heard talk about sanctions. And just recently, this week gone, the United States have called off negotiations with Canada, for instance, on trade matters, because there was an advertisement from one state in Canada that carried Ronald Reagan saying he did not support tariffs. So we are living in uncharted waters where the United States foreign policy is unpredictable and can be considered chaotic at best. So we really don't know what's happening. But what I can say to the Grenadian people is that what is happening now, it is not classic Republican or Democratic policies towards the region and so. It is this particular administration that are embarking on these policies. And while we do not have no control over sanctions or measures taken against us if we say no, I will ask simply, then what next? If we say yes now, what next would they ask us to do? Where would the line be drawn? When is it that we're going to say no to something? And if every time we say no, are we going to be... You see, this issue, foreign policy, cannot be driven on the basis of fear. It must be done on the basis of principle. And we are not anti-American. We are not picking a fight with the United States. We respect the partnership that Grenada has had over the years with the United States. And we want to continue to work with the United States with regards to security matters, to fighting drug trafficking, arms smuggling, and we want to continue to partner as we have done through agreements or treaties like the Shipwrighter Agreement, for instance. We have always cooperated with the United States with regards to fighting illicit drug trade and illicit arm trade and so on. So we are not picking a fight with the US. But we are saying that on this particular issue, Grenada do not want to be part or be a proxy or be a pawn in a game between much greater powers than ourselves. And we want to encourage, we are only 110,000 people thereabouts, a few. 100 and what? 34 square miles or thereabouts. We are only a few miles from Trinidad and Venezuela. We want to encourage peace. We do not in any way want to be facilitators of military aggression against our neighbors. Venezuela over the years have been good to us as well. And we want to continue fostering healthy partnerships and relationships between states, those afar and those near to us. And while we continue to advocate for the government to say no to the installation of radar equipment and personnel on our shores, and in our seas, and in our air space, we are saying to the US, we are not picking a fight with you. But on this issue of principle, we cannot agree or accede at this time to your request, or no other time, in fact. We want to continue to work with you to tackle the issue of illegal drug trade and arms smuggling in our region, in our space, but we believe that the militarization of the Caribbean waters is a very dangerous and bad precedent. At some point in time, I say we have to draw the line. And if we don't draw the line now, when, on what issue will we draw the line on?
Yes. Doc, well, I have, but Ali has several times mentioned the interests of the population, the interests of other Caribbean countries, CARICOM, the need for transparency, the need for information, the need for consultation, the involvement of several former Caribbean prime ministers and so. And all of that, the coalition that he represents, see as part of a process, and they hope that that process will lead to a particular outcome. I know you on behalf of CCR, and in fact your idea that is your brainchild, is of the view that as a people, we need to we may have to, as a people and a nation, we may have to confront these type of issues from time to time, and maybe in the coming period with greater regularity, because you have this issue now, you may have issue of hurricane, you may have issue of COVID, and that I know it's your view that this probably provides an opportunity to put in place what you describe as a constitutional convention for responding to these type of issues so that we can arrive at decisions that best satisfy the interests of our country and ensures its survival. So I just want to, I don't know if you want to just take up from there by way of introduction, and then we can go into that. What's your whole thinking in terms of what is a survival issue? If this is a survival issue, what are the types of issues you see as survival issues, and the kind of procedure, the kind of convention you envisage?
Thank you very much, Ewart. I too join praying that Melissa is.
Doc, I don't know if you did the volume, if you are closer to the mic, or we just get the volume a bit up. I thought we were a bit louder when we initially we just.
Yes, my equipment is better off.
Yeah. Bentley, how is something now? Yeah,
I think
proceed.
it's better now. Is it?
Yes. Proceed, and we'll make any corrections.
Good. So I too would join with you, Ewart, and with Ambassador Gill in praying that Melissa would not be as dangerous to Jamaica and its neighbors as it seems it might. And incidentally, that too is a survival issue for Caribbean countries. The impact of hurricanes, which we know very well of here in Grenada, the impact of earthquakes in Haiti. We also have in St. Vincent and the Grenadines the impact of eruption of the earth sometimes. So who is CCR, and what is the mandate of CCR coming out of its membership? You are a founding member of CCR, as to Robert Ferguson, Casey, Lady Anandi Chapman Joseph, Jerry, who incidentally today is not very well, as he would say, the car is in the garage, and we remember you, Jerry, as we speak now. Professor Dr. Wendy Grenade, Paul Roberts, and I bring up the rear. We are a think tank on constitution reform. Our name gives us a Citizens for Constitution Reform. And the request by the United States of America to the government of Grenada for permission to install military-grade radar at the Maurice Bishop International Airport serves as a call to CCR to look at the end of our Constitution, see how we respond as a nation to these survival challenges. Because we are a voluntary democratic organization in CCR, CCR as such might take a position, but individual members of our body are free to follow their own judgments and conscience on issues arising. So you might find, for example, some members of CCR identifying with Ambassador Gill's coalition for peace, and that is quite all right with us. We have no difficulty with that. But our position, our official position in CCR is, as was stated in our public statement of the 13th of October just gone, namely that request by the United States to Grenada reminds us that in the context of our mandate on thinking about constitution reform, we are now at the crossroad where we need a constitutional convention on how Grenada should respond to national survival challenges, especially in relation to issues of public health, COVID, for example, the environment, hurricanes, economic issues, whether it's CBI or threats to tourism or threats to our fishing industry, and security issues. We proposed in our paper on the 13th of October that such a convention would evolve pending relevant reforms to the Constitution of Grenada. What is a convention then? A convention is a practice, a guide as to how the Constitution should work. Let me give you two overarching examples of conventions in the Constitution of Grenada. I am at section 90 of the Constitution. I read, "There shall be a Governor General of Grenada who shall be appointed by Her Majesty and shall hold office during Her Majesty's pleasure." On the literal text here, you might get the impression that His Majesty, out of his own head, appoints the Governor General, and that the Governor General holds office during His Majesty's pleasure. That is how the literal text reads. But by convention, this section 19 means that His Majesty will appoint a Governor General very strictly in accordance with the advice, quite interestingly, not of the Cabinet of Grenada, but of the Prime Minister of Grenada. Similarly, notwithstanding what the literal text says, the Governor General of Grenada holds office not during His Majesty's pleasure at all, and not even during the pleasure of the Cabinet of Grenada, but instead during the pleasure of the Prime Minister of Grenada. So here you have the text saying one thing, but you cannot understand what the text means unless you superimpose on the text what the convention is. And this convention is inflexible. meaning if His Majesty attempts to remove the Governor General of Grenada or appoint a person as the Governor General of Grenada in his own judgment or discretion, that is a revolution in the Constitution. So strong is the convention. Let me give you another example of how a convention operates on the literal text of the Constitution, so as to have the literal text make sense in the context of the independence of Grenada. I just gave you that as to the appointment of the Governor General. The text doesn't say anything about how the Governor General is chosen. The text gives the impression that the king sitting in his palace picks a Governor General, does not put in the, and if he attempts to do so, that is a revolution to the Constitution. Let me give you another instance where the text says one thing, but the convention operates on the text in a certain way. This time I'm reading from section 34, subsection 2 of the Constitution. This is the Speaker of the House of Representatives now. The Speaker may be elected either from among the members of the House of Representatives who are not ministers or parliamentary secretaries, or from among persons who are not members of the House of Representatives. Now that reads as if from time to time the Speaker is chosen from among either members of the House or persons who are not members of the House. But by convention, almost settled convention, since independence, the Speaker of the House is almost always not a member of the House. I say almost always because I remember Marcel Peters. He was the Speaker of the House, and he very well may have been a member. I have not refreshed my memory on this. So if I'm wrong, let me forgive me. Certainly, apart from Marcel Peters, almost always, although the text speaks as if the Speaker is going to be chosen from among members or non-members, there is this convention, this practice, this habit of having as a Speaker of the House a person who is not a member, as indeed is the position today as we speak. So I have given you two examples of a convention operating on the text of the Constitution. In one case, choosing the Governor General, that convention, as I say, is inflexible. It controls the text of the Constitution. The other example I gave, if it is not always followed, it is almost always followed. So what CCR is angling for in the face of this request by the United States of America to the Prime Minister of Grenada is that this is a juncture at which we can start now to have emerged a convention saying that when you have such national survival challenges, the government of the day is not to respond as if this is an ordinary matter. Just go to the cabinet room, discuss it, and decide it. No, we need a convention saying that there is to be what we suggested to be named a National Survival Council. That council we propose would comprise personnel from the government of the day, the opposition, certainly the parliamentary opposition, trade union council, private sector, churches, and civil society organizations, including those in the diaspora. What is meant by meaningful consultation? In constitutional law, and there are cases on it, for example, in Guyana, the court there had ruled that the government of Guyana should engage in meaningful consultation with health personnel before the Minister of Health could appoint the governing body, and use the term meaningful consultation. Shortly after that decision, the Constitution of Guyana was amended to provide for meaningful consultation, so that the expression meaningful consultation is known to constitutional law. Now, meaningful consultation entails that entities consulted, say like the Trade Union Council, would not go out in public and say what advice it gives to the government on a national survival challenge. Certainly, if we in CCF were consulted, at all events, the convener of CCR would not be expected to go in public and say the government should say no to the US request, or the government should say yes. No, that's not how it would operate. What would happen would be that consultees would suggest to the government that in responding to this US request, you should consider certain things. And I heard you were putting some ideas to Ambassador Gill. So in the consultation process, those consulted would give ideas, but they wouldn't come out in public and say, I think the government should say no, or the government should say yes. It would not be conducted that way. Now, we are gratified in CCR that since we published that paper on the 13th of October, that same day in the night, in a program called Beyond the Headlines, GBL, we witnessed Professor Ivor Griffith from Guyana, who is an expert in security matters and international relations, among other things, taking almost identically the same stand as the CCR on this matter of the US request to Grenada. He was the Prime Minister would have to consider the national interests of Grenada. The Prime Minister would have to consider whole range of matters. But he never, Professor Griffith, attempted to say, I think that the government should say no. I think the government should say yes. Even more pointedly, this week, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Zalz, I saw him and know him on the internet. He was saying that this issue is so complex, this matter of the radar, that he would suggest to the Prime Minister of Grenada that the Prime Minister say yes or no. On the contrary, Dr. Gonzalez was saying, if he were asked by the Prime Minister of Grenada how to respond, he, Dr. Gonzalez, would say, consider the national interest of Grenada, have regard to possible repercussions, whether you say yes or no, but that he is not going to say in public whether Grenada should say yes or no. Now, we are comforted by those developments, Professor Griffith and Prime Minister Gonzalez. And that fortifies us in our analysis on CCR. It is not for us, certainly not in public, to say the Prime Minister say yes or the Prime Minister say no. Our position is, if we are consulted, we would bring to the attention of the Prime Minister certain factors having regard to the national interest of Grenada. So you're not going to hear me out there, he was saying in public, or to anybody for that matter, outside the context of CCR, I think the Prime Minister of Grenada should say yes or should say no. We're not going to operate that day. So I think I'm going to pause here.
Well, Doc, I just want to ask you, what would you, if you are asked, how would you define or how would you describe a survival issue? What would be your response?
A survival challenge is an issue of such complex, complicated dimensions relating to public health, hurricanes, security dimensions, that the way you answer it, the way you deal with it, could have long-lasting, deep repercussions, not only for the economy of Grenada, but for the society of Grenada, which might not be overcome quickly or easily. That is how I would define a national survival challenge.
Okay, but second question to you is, how does that, I know you touched I think on this at the start, how does meaningful consultation, is there any inconsistency between meaningful consultation, which is confidential? So, for example, the trade union movement, the churches, and so, and public advocacy, which is very public and very open.
No,
So
there's
is
no
there-
inconsistency. You need both of them going down side by side. People outside are expressing views. Those views will inform the entities being consulted, and indeed those views will also inform the decision taken ultimately by the government. So it's a concentric thing. You can't stop the people from expressing their views in public while the consultations are going on. It's hand in glove.
Yeah. So it's public involvement, but at the same time recognizing the EPBC, the obligation or prerogative of the government of the day to make the ultimate decision.
At the end of the day, the Prime Minister would have to decide. And he would have regard to all of these things. What is being said in the wider public, what the consultees are saying in the National Survival Council, and of course, what is being said in the cabinet. All in the mix. All in the mix. And the advantage of all of this is this. Whatever decision the Prime Minister comes up with in the end, most people would feel at least their views were taken into account. And that would provide a rallying ground to rally around the decision taken by the Prime Minister, whatever it might be.
So that's almost a way you suggested of, in those moments of survival challenges, bringing the national interest rather than narrow sectorial, be it partisan politics or whatever interests, bringing the national interest to the fore, and in a sense, and giving it priority to, at those critical moments, priority to narrow sectorial, sectional, partisan interests.
That is the point which both Dr. Gonzalez and Dr. Ivan Griffith, in their own way, they are making. Namely, that what must be paramount in this exercise is the national interest. And when the Prime Minister decides, all of us, as many of us as possible, would appreciate that the Prime Minister took that decision after meaningful consultation with these entities. Whatever might be our own view of the matter, let us rally around the Prime Minister, not as a political standstill, but in the national interest. And thinking that the body politic out there would have an appreciation that their views were heard and considered. And the Prime Minister decided, having regard to the national interest. And so all of us now should band around the Prime Minister.
Yes. Ali, you with us, right?
Yeah, I'm here.
Right, good. Just to shift a bit, I have an additional question. Is it probable in your view, or is it a consideration that the government and the Prime Minister should take on board that if Grenada was to say yes, that in addition to all the other points you made, we cannot rule out actually being a military target if a conflict was to Europe, and have the revisit the days of bombs and missiles dropping on our country.
Allow me to first of all, though, applaud the CCR with what I believe is an absolutely brilliant suggestion with regards to bringing what I refer to as bringing constitutional governance alive. Because that idea with regard to what Dr. Alexis outlined, I believe in many respects will bring the Constitution alive, would reinforce democracy, and it will give a sense of participation in a real sense outside of voting at election time to the citizenry. It is not lost on me. I mean, Dr. Alexis highlighted two examples on that issue with with Prime Minister Gonzalez and the professor. But also, too, it is very important to note that in this particular crisis facing Jamaica with Hurricane Melissa, that one of the things that Prime Minister Holness did was to have an engagement with the leader of the opposition in giving a briefing and an update with regards to the hurricane, and ensuring as well that as part of the preparedness, that every constituency, regardless of opposition of government, resources are made available for preparation. So it augurs well. To answer your question specifically, we cannot rule out that option at all. Because if it is that we lend ourselves to be a base for intelligence gathering, and as I understand it, I'm not a military man, but I understand in this world of high-tech military warfare and use of drones and high equipment and so on, that radars and satellites and so on is used for precision and for guiding different military hardware, then obviously it becomes a fair target with regards to the Venezuelans or whoever else trying to get rid of that radar, that they may consider a threat to the national security. I mean, as much as you do not agree, and I do not agree with the Israeli strike on Iran with regards to the development of its nuclear weapon, but clearly the Israelis consider that Iran having nuclear weapons is a real live threat to their security, having regards to the history and what's happening with the Palestinian people and so on and so forth. So I say that to say that it is not far-fetched at all with when third states host military hardware for other countries, they that third state is now in the middle of the crisis. Look at the missile crisis between the then Soviet Union and the United States that brought the world to the brink of nuclear warfare. Right? The Soviet Union looking to install missiles on Cuba that is a stone's throw away from the United States. Here again, we don't have to go far. A live example is what's happening now with Russia and Ukraine. Let us not forget that Russia is against Ukraine joining NATO because the Russians continue to argue, whether you agree with them or not, that Ukraine right on their doorstep, being a member of NATO and having the possibility and the potential that serious military hardware can be installed in Ukraine as a NATO country can then be used in an aggressive manner against Russia. So that the histories, the examples are there all over the world with regards to the deployment of military hardware in third countries, where and so that let us say the offending country see it as a threat to their national security and this notion of national interest. So, to answer your question specifically, yes, Grenada then opens up itself as a military target to Venezuela in this instance if a radar is installed at the Maurice Bishop International Airport. In fact, the Venezuelan authorities, Vice President, has said loud and clear to Trinidad in this instance that if Trinidad makes its territories available to the United States to strike Venezuela, then the Venezuelans have a right of self-defense. So the Venezuelans have already said that to Trinidad and Tobago. So the examples are there. We do not have
Yeah.
to even read between the lines in answering your question.
Yes. I take all that you say, but I was also thinking additionally, following that conflict in the Middle East, I think you will recall on well, too many occasions to check when Israel they bomb hospitals, they bomb schools, they bomb universities, and it was always said that listen, either Hamas or Hezbollah had installed military equipment and were using military equipment for no
Yes.
civilian units.
And they were using these hospitals and so on and human shields.
That's what
So,
that was
so
it, that was always the argument. So I
that
just
was the
asked
Israeli
that
argument.
to highlight that point. Uh, Doc, if I may just come back to you, are you hearing us enough?
Yes, please. I'm
Right.
hearing.
How will such a convention that you have addressed here tonight so brilliantly, how will such a convention come into being?
Tomorrow morning, the Prime Minister contacts these various groups. Somebody suggested to us that also to be contacted would be the OECS Secretariat, because we have treaty obligations in the OECS. Somebody from the CARICOM Secretariat, because we have obligations in CARICOM, and we take that on board. The minute the Prime Minister contacts these people, of course, he would do it through his emissaries and invites them to meaningful consultation. That is the beginning of the convention. How conventions begin is not always clear. When you have conventions arising, take for example this leading convention that as the British Empire unfolded, those countries that were dominions, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, they were able to take decisions regarding fully their domestic affairs, and the UK Parliament would not pass legislation extending to the dominions without the advice and consent of those dominions. How did the convention start? There was a meeting, I think in 1926 or so, the usual Commonwealth meetings. And that it was considered that the UK Parliament would no longer enact legislation extending to the Dominions without their advice and consent. That begun that convention. Good. Similarly, the Prime Minister of Grenada, whatever his language, invites various entities and says, we have an issue, not that it is beyond the capacity of the cabinet to decide, but I would prefer if I have inputs from these various bodies, that he would let the other bodies know which other bodies have been consulted. That would be the beginning of this convention. So it would be like the 1920s, I think it was Imperial Conference, when they begun that convention related to dominions. So we will be able to identify the beginning of this convention as to how national survival challenges are to be responded to. Now, the ambassador was talking about the Prime Minister of Jamaica contacting the leader of the opposition in Jamaica as Melissa heads towards Jamaica. So there you see again the beginning of, so to speak, a national survival consultation to respond to a national survival challenge, namely storm or hurricane Melissa heading towards Jamaica. That is how sometimes these conventions emerge to meet an impending situation. It's not before, up till then, somebody sat back and said, you know, we should have a national survival council. It is coming out of the survival challenge. Melissa heading towards Jamaica. There emerges the idea as to how you should respond to these situations. Now, the Minister may invite entities, and an entity might say, I'm not taking part in that. That's a matter for you to decide. Why didn't you invite us to decide other things? You can't avoid that. But at least the Prime Minister would have taken the step to get the convention going, to involve this National Survival Council. Of course, there's nothing in the name. It doesn't have to be called National Survival Council. It doesn't have to be called a National Survival Challenge. But that is the idea of underpinning it.
Yes. Let me just ask, as a matter of interest, though, would you say that the method by which the independent senators are selected has become a convention, or is moving in that direction of being a convention?
Very much so. You can also include in Grenada the situation in which there is no leader of the opposition.
Mm-hmm.
But the Governor General could appoint what would be called opposition senators. Now, when Ewart was the Governor General, it was said that he consulted not really who the opposition, who the Constitution said should have been consulted, but then he, in his own independent judgment, appointed the opposition senators. And that caused unniceness between the Governor General and it would have been the leader of the opposition. But I must say If that was what the Governor General at the time did, it makes sense because he was not going to consult the Prime Minister on the matter of appointment of opposition senators.
Mhm.
That wouldn't be the best thing to do. There's no leader of the opposition. So the Governor General, in independent judgment, he appoints some opposition, call them opposition senators. So you could see shot through the Constitution of Grenada, there arise situations which call for analogous thinking related to national survival challenges. Those words might not have been used, but the essence is there.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Okay, I just want us to take a short break and recognize those sponsoring this program, Gem Professional Solutions Inc., Gem FM carrying this program on FM radio out of Canada, and also Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, Cheetah.
Attention all workers, your health and safety at work are critical. At Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, we are dedicated to ensuring you have a safe and secure work environment. If you encounter unsafe conditions or are involved in an accident, take immediate actions. Report it to the company, your shop steward, and make sure it reaches your union. Your health and safety is a priority, and a strong union means a strong voice for your rights. Don't wait. Address concerns right away and protect your well-being. For a safer workplace and a better quality of life, stand with the Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. Together, we can create a safer, healthier work environment for everyone.
Yes, welcome back. Brother
Yeah, I'm here.
yes. I want you to just comment on an aspect of what is happening that I suspect the coalition and you as an attorney will have great concern about the, uh, the manner in which the force has been used against alleged drug traffickers, uh, and their apparent support for that process by the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago.
Let us be absolutely clear that what we are witnessing with the bombing of vessels in international waters or wherever else under the guise of narco trafficking or narco terrorism is extrajudicial killing. It's against international law and violates the principles of the rule of law. That's what it is, simply put. Now, there is no international convention that establishes what quote unquote is narco terrorism. One will recall that in the US fight against after 9/11, the United States came up with this term called illegal combatants. Illegal combatants. And these illegal combatants was captured, sent to Guantanamo Bay for years without charge and without trial. That is against international law. That violates the very core of the principles of human rights law. And we in the Caribbean, when persons are caught with illegal drugs and an investigation is done, charges are brought. They are brought to court, charged and tried before a court of law. They either plead guilty, not guilty. Evidence have been led through tried and tested principles of the law of evidence, and at the end of the day, if they are convicted, they are sentenced. Now, what's happening here in Caribbean Sea is not different to what former Philippine President Duerte did on land. You recall, our listeners and viewers can recall a couple of years ago when President Duarte was the president of the Philippines, he declared war against drug traffickers and so on, and summarily execute them and so forth. On his demission from office, he was then charged. I promised myself to look into what has happened with this charge, so I did not get around to it before the program this evening. But it is an interesting point for listeners and viewers to follow up on. You can Google these things. President Duerte of the Philippines. So that what is even more is that the United States Congress continue to demand some sort of accountability from the government and President Trump with regards to what's happening in the Caribbean Sea. It is not sanctioned by the U.S. government, by Congress, whatever constitutional
we
body
just
may
want
say
you,
needs.
if you take off your camera, I would like you to assist. Because we getting you in bits and pieces. If you take off the
Yes,
camera,
yes, that is why I've been taking on the camera and so in the past.
I realize that, yes.
Yes, the Wi-Fi is a bit unstable.
Yes.
Yes, so as I was saying, I made reference to former President of the Philippines, Duerte, and I was urging and encouraging listeners and viewers to research to see what has happened to the charges that was brought against him with the persons that were summarily executed and so on and so forth.
I think they're still pending.
And I was also making the point that the actions of the Caribbean Sea is not sanctioned by the United States Congress. And indeed, there are both Democratic and Republican senators and so on, and congressmen and women, they are demanding and asking for answers with regard to why is it that the government declared war? And this issue of narco-terrorism, one state on its own cannot establish international law. International law is developed through different means, one of which is international treaties. Now, any state can make any law for its domestic jurisdiction. Yes, Grenada can go in the parliament and say what is narco-terrorism pursuant to and define it pursuant to the Parliament of Grenada, and establish it and enforce it within the jurisdiction of the Grenada. Similarly, the United States could do that. But when you're applying, you cannot apply domestic law in international waters. The law is absolutely clear on these issues. So that the United States, one state, regardless of how powerful you are, whether it be the United States, China, Russia, and so on, cannot define and establish and develop international law and norms and implement it. And clearly what is happening now, it is a very regrettable, sad, unprecedented, unprincipled, unlawful killing of persons in the marine space. No evidence has been led, and even if there is evidence, these persons have a right to a fair trial in a court of law. And that is why the Shipwrighter Agreement was established. For the listeners and viewers, the United States and several Caribbean countries, including Grenada, have established what is called a ship rider agreement. What it simply means, the rider on a U.S. Coast Guard, the rider can have to be a law enforcement officer from Grenada or St. Vincent or St. Lucia and so on, of a treaty country, right? Because what it provides is that different vessels carry different flags. Flags meaning where those vessels are registered. Yes? So that the Grenada fishing boats that are registered by the Grenada Fisheries Authority and so on, the Grenada flag vessels, and different port authorities and so on, they have what is called flags. We don't have to get into all of those technicalities, but
Mhm.
just simply put, different vessels, fishing vessels, vessels that trade between Grenada and Trinidad on a weekly basis, they are registered in different islands. And it and those how this the law works. Where the vessel is registered, it then becomes part of the territory of registration. So a Grenada flag vessel is part of the territory of Grenada. Yes? So that you have
Mhm.
what is called flag state jurisdiction, and you have what is called port state jurisdiction. Now the flag state on international waters holds sway, so that another country simply cannot board a Grenada vessel in international waters. To do so, the ship rider agreement, there is a protocol established in the ship rider agreement whereby the Grenada government can give permission or authority to the U.S. Coast Guard to board a Grenada vessel on international waters. That is the established international regime with regards to the enforcement of international law in the fight against illicit drugs in the Caribbean, the ship rider agreement. So this issue where you simply bomb, you have intel, or you see what is suspected of drugs. And let me say this: in our domestic jurisdiction in Grenada, when a person is charged for drugs, that drug samples of that drugs have to be brought to a laboratory to be tested. You could see a bag with white substance and it's not cooking is flour or sugar or some other thing else. It has to be tested before anyone is convicted for illicit drug offense in Grenada. And that is what we speak about rule of law. So that these extrajudicial killings, where persons are summarily killed, and then you have the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, who, by the way, is a senior counsel, is a lawyer, says kill them all. And the President of the US says, kill them. That language and attitude and approach is unlawful, is extrajudicial, and unprecedented. And
And,
if it
and
is that heads of state that is supposed to uphold the rule of law, saying and doing those things, then we are in uncharted territory and very challenging times. And we have heard several leaders of the Caribbean denounce these extrajudicial killings, and I want to add my voice to it.
and
And
of
you
course,
see,
sorry, go ahead.
and you see, what is that when you do not before the two Trinidadian persons were killed, it appeared to the ordinary man and woman on the street of Trinidad that is Venezuelans, or at the very least Latinos, getting executed and being killed out there. But when it struck home that Trinidadians, and regardless of what they were up to, that's not the point. Regardless whether or not they were in illegal activities and so on, they have a right to trial. They have a right for trial. Look at what transpired. in one of the bombings, 2 or 3 persons survived, and they were then taken and sent to them to their country of birth. I mean, it is just the most outrageous and unprecedented happenings now with regards to what is happening there. We have never seen this before. We have never seen this before. And another thing, how is it that the United States they are saying that these vessels are heading to the US? What conclusion could they make, these pirogues leaving Venezuela or wherever else heading to the US? And all of the evidence from the United States Drug Enforcement Agency, the USDA, tells us that Venezuela is not in the top three of countries that supplies drugs or where drugs come from. We know of Mexico, which is number one, Ecuador, Peru. Venezuela is not one of the top listed countries where that is the source of drugs, illegal drugs that into the US. So I mean, we're in bother sometimes. I mean, to put it mildly, I mean, a lot of what is happening, we have never seen it before. It defies not just law, but also logic.
Yes, and as you said, there's strong opposition in the U.S. Congress on both sides regarding that, because I heard one person who, I think Senator Rand Paul,
Yes.
who supports the administration on many issues, making the point that empirical evidence shows that even when these boats are boarded, searched, brought into a US port, 25% of the times they are completely innocent. There's no drugs or anything, and they are up to no unlawful activity.
Well,
So,
if I may just add my voice to that, I have dealt with matters under the Shipwriters Agreement. I have dealt with live matters involving Grenadian nationals under the Shipwriters Agreement. So I have first-hand knowledge and experience with regards to what happens there. And it is really, and the Shipwriters Agreement, because in our press conference I did a while, or 2 weeks ago, I made the point that what Grenada really needs assistance in our border control. We need Coast Guard vessels. Since the decommissioning of the Tyrrell Bay Coast Guard a couple of years ago, Grenada has no mothership as a Coast Guard vessel. What we have is small choppers. Yes? So we need assistance with regards to Coast Guard vessels. We need assistance with regards to new choppers and so on. And of course, we need training and equipment for men and women in the Coast Guard division of the Royal Grenada Police Force to assist them in drug interdiction and so on. So these are the real life issues that we continue to clamor for, and that I am sure the government is seeking assistance from the US and so on. We need more assistance in that area, But and that is why I wrote a couple weeks ago. You telling me now that we need a nuclear powered submarine and the biggest aircraft carrier in the world to fight drugs, interdiction, and so on in our space? No, something is not right. The truth about the US action and so on, of course, I think can be reasonably questioned by reasonably minds of men and women.
and you mentioned former President Duarte. So he is before the International Criminal Court, right?
Yes, as I said, it just beat me to update
He
myself.
was taken to the Hague.
He was
But
taken to the Hague.
I just want to establish that uh, the US has not signed onto the jurisdiction of the ICC, the International Criminal
Yes,
Court.
yes. The US have not signed on to the jurisdiction of the ICC.
But
Neither
but
Israel, neither
Trinidad,
Russia. Powerful countries are not
Neither,
are not signatories to the ICC,
right.
but they always
But
but they
Trinidad is a
always
signatory.
huh?
Trinidad is a signatory.
Yes, Trinidad is a signatory.
Okay.
And if you look at the history of the ICC, it is always leaders of poor countries
The end up there.
that appears before the ICC, that hold before the ICC. Poor
Okay.
non-white countries, I can add. And that is nothing to, and it's just the reality.
But they actually Trinidad had a critical role in the formation of the ICC through the former president Robinson Hudson.
Yes.
What part
And
is
not just that, another two important things that we can mention with regards to security is that Trinidad and Tobago, you would have heard about the CARICOM statement that Trinidad and Tobago reserved on, that they did not sign on to, with regards to the zone of peace for CARICOM. Trinidad and Tobago holds the ministerial portfolio of security within CARICOM. Yes? So that point has been made. And secondly, Trinidad and Tobago is the nominee from GRULOC nations, GRULOC meaning Latin America and the Caribbean region,
the
for
UN
the
Security
Islamic
Council.
Security Council as well.
Okay.
So it's ironic that the Trinidad government is taking the position that they are taking now, and Prime Minister Kamala Bessat Tisasar, although correct in saying that national security issues must be the purview of every independent state within CARICOM. While she is true in saying that, but CARICOM have always seek to have a unified foreign policy positions on important issues like that, because as small nations, we are strongest when we speak with one voice. We do not have
Although
strong military armies, strong armies or great wealth and so. But when we speak at one with one voice on issues like this, uh, um, on foreign policy issues, we are much stronger.
although her answer will be that Trinidad is on the front line of the attack from narco terrorists. But I guess your answer will be that there is a framework, uh, ship riders framework and other arrangements for dealing with it. That's all?
And the truth is, all of us, all the Caribbean islands, some more than others, we're all on the front line battling the issue of illegal drugs and illegal firearms. All of us, some with greater to a greater extent than others, but none of us are immune from the ravages of the illegal drug trade and illegal trade in firearms. None of us whatsoever. It is now for us to work together through the RSS, through all of the regional security systems and so on that we have in place, to strengthen it, to invest in it more, and of course, rely on a country like the United States, advancing technology and the training and so on to assist us in dealing with those issues. National security issues of drugs and so on, it may very well fall into what Dr. Alexis Dr. Alexis speaks about in terms of survival threat,
Mm.
because that, in many respects, is a serious national security issue.
Mhm. So, Doc, I want you to comment on, I don't know if you want to comment on any of these issues here, but I have some follow-up questions for you.
The well, this is not related to constitutional convention and the constitution, but I must say that the prospect of any country, US or otherwise, killing people at sea without a trial, no charge, no conviction, must be a concern to Canadians, because Grenadian people from time to time go ahead
Mhm.
towards Venezuela.
Yep.
And it must be a very serious matter that a Grenadian bishop could be exposed to extrajudicial killing like that. You see, Ewart, this is in a sense, because I was listening to Arley Gill, all the points about we need assistance with our fight against the drug trade. All of these would be issues that go into the matter of the National Survival Council having discussed with the Prime Minister. All of these things about if you install a radio in the country, you thereby expose the country to retaliatory events. All of these would have to go into the melting pot on the issue of having a national survival council and how do you respond to the UN. That is why you see Professor Ivor Griffith, and I must say even Dr. Alexis, I say even because he's a head of government and he has been trying to broker peace between Venezuela and Guyana. Despite all those initiatives he is taking, still he is saying he would not take it upon himself to advise the Prime Minister of Grenada to say yea on this. He said if he were asked by the Prime Minister of Grenada, his response would be, remember the national interest of Grenada. Everything revolves around the national interest of Grenada. So whether the concerns which Ambassador Gill is raising there quite correctly, or others, you put all of that into the melting pot at the National Survival Council. And that is why we CCR are saying this is our position. We are calling for the emergence of this convention, pen reform to the Constitution, to write into the text of the Constitution provisions catering for this sort of institution. So whether it's Ivor Griffiths, whether it is Ralph, whether it's Arley Gill, from the time CCR put out that statement on the 13th of October, all that we have heard strengthens us in our conviction that you need to engender this convention, kind of convention, pending its being structured textually into the Constitution, so that all of these points being made would be factored into the Prime Minister's response. And we in CCR are not going to be saying in public the Prime Minister should say yes or the Prime Minister should say no. Our position is that there should be a national response to this national survival challenge. What of the national survival challenges which come up from time to time? Happily, not every day, not every month, not every year. But these challenges are not going away, whether it's in public health, hurricane, CBI, this man being challenged with security concerns, whether it's drugs, whatever, we are losing our innocence and we have to face the reality. And this is the response from the CCR. I've given you two concrete situations in which conventions can eclipse the text of the Constitution. You cannot appreciate the text of the Constitution without bringing to bear on the text the relevant convention.
Okay, so as I understand it, you say that ultimately one will want to see this as part of the text of the Constitution.
Yes, yes.
So my
that's
question is
objective, to have it written into the text. But meanwhile, we have to treat it as a convention to inform the general constitution.
Yeah. So my question is, would such a change to write that convention into the text of the Constitution require a referendum?
It would. It would require a referendum approval. For example, provisions of the Constitution saying how the executive authority of the state should be exercised. That certainly is a referendum entrenched provision. So you would need a referendum for that. And that is why, meanwhile, you could treat it as a convention because you're not changing the text of the Constitution. You, just as I was reading for you how Section 9 speaks, but how it is to be operated is informed by the convention to which I refer.
Okay, now we are having some technical problems. We really apologize for that because the content of the program is so rich, but we can't do anything about the technical ones. I think it's the internet is beyond us. So, but the content of the program is so rich, and it's a pity that has happened. But we just lead up to 10 minutes before we end. And I would just want to again recognize those sponsoring the program: GEL Professional Solutions Inc., Gem FM, carry the program out of Canada, and also Grenada Technical and Allied Workers.
Attention all workers, your health and safety at work are critical. At Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, we are dedicated to ensuring you have a safe and secure work environment. If you encounter unsafe conditions or are involved in an accident, take immediate actions. Report it to the company, your shop steward, and make sure it reaches your union. Your health and safety is a priority, and a strong union means a strong voice for your rights. Don't wait. Address concerns right away and protect your well-being. For a safer workplace and a better quality of life, stand with the Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. Together, we can create a safer, healthier work environment for everyone.
Yes. Ali, maybe we take you first in terms of final comments before we close.
Well, let me use this opportunity to urge persons to sign the petition. We have a petition out as part of the coalition to add their voice to the discussion and to say no to the installation of military grade radar in Grenada. So there is a petition that's circulating on the internet, and we encourage persons to sign the petition. We will be having other activities, but I believe that Parliament is sitting on Tuesday, and the Prime Minister will be updating the nation on what's happening on these issues. There are two other issues that we understand is also on the table, and maybe if I use that forum, the Prime Minister can also on Tuesday update the nation on what's happening with that. That is the third country deportees from the US being hosted in Grenada. In other words, I believe that persons do follow the issue of the high deportation in the United States where persons are picked up and deported um, to different countries. And when we speak of third countries, we want non-Grenadians deported to Grenada. That's another issue that I believe that the government of Grenada is grappling with. And also another issue with regards to what is Grenada's position with regards to voting against the U.S. blockade on Cuba is also another important issue that will be coming up in the United Nations very soon. All in all, one can conclude that the government in Grenada, the government in St. George's, is now facing some serious diplomatic decision making. And we want to be in a position, frankly, to support our government. Our government must understand that they are not facing this alone. And I need to stress and to emphasize that this is not a partisan political issue of NDC and NNP. It's a national interest issue, an issue that has impact not just for Grenada, but also for the Caribbean region. So I want to encourage all Grenadians to be, get themselves in the know on the subject, read as much, listen as much on the subject, and to play an active role. Let your voices be heard. The Prime Minister said that ultimately the decision of his government will be influenced by public opinion. So let him know what we are thinking, let him know how we feel, and let the members of cabinet know how we feel about this issue. So I want to encourage Grenadians to not to sit idle on the fence. No, I do, and I agree with Dr. Alexis that if we were called upon to advise government or anyone who's advising government, you do not take your advice to the street in terms of if you're consulted in a private capacity, as how Dr. Alexis has proposed. However, the coalition believes that this issue of the military reader is one that needs serious public ventilation and discussion, and we are leading the charge along with a group of concerned Grenadians that we teamed up with last Thursday to do a public march. This subject is of great national concern, and I want to encourage every national in Grenada to pay attention to this issue and to let us have a discussion as to how best we can deal with these challenges that are now facing us. Thank you so much once again for having me on your program.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Brother Ali. And Doc, final comments. And I don't know if you could just touch on the issue of that relationship, you can, however you want to describe it, between public advocacy and meaningful consultation.
Sure. First, we remind how conventions operate on the text of the Constitution. Section 57, the exercise of the executive authority of Grenada vested in His Majesty That is what it says in the text. But a convention written into the Constitution in section 62, I think, says how that executive authority is to be exercised. It started off as a convention, and it wound its way into the text in section 62, saying essentially that in the exercise of its functions, the Governor General shall act in accordance with the advice of the cabinet ministers. That started off as a convention, although the text of the Constitution says the executive authority is vested in His Majesty. There was a convention saying that the King Queen is to act in accordance with the advice of the cabinet, and it evolved and found its way now in section 62 of the Constitution. I already read in section 9 the appointment of the Governor General. That is still the subject only of a convention. It has not yet made its way into the text of the Constitution. Similarly, we at PCR are advocating that the Lord now, in response to that request from the United States of America regarding Grenada at the airport, there should urge now a convention that when there comes about a national survival challenge, public health, hurricanes, the CBI being threatened, whether by Europe, by America, or whoever else, these should be treated as national survival challenges. It is no accident that over the last 2 days or so, the OECS Bar Association, meeting here in Grenada in its annual conference, had a lot to talk about CBI, because it is obvious that challenges to CBI are assuming dimensions of a national survival issue for our economy. So we are advocating that there emerge now this convention on national survival challenges. The way it will work is there will be public debate all around the country, public debate on the request from the United States of America. Those public debates will impact these entities, government, opposition, trade union, council, private sector, churches, etc. And in turn, these entities being consulted, meaningful consultation, they're not going to vacuum by themselves. They will be impacted by the public discourses going on. So the public discourses will feed into these entities. And in turn, these entities will feed into the meaningful consultation they're going to be having with government. And when the Prime Minister comes to this conclusion, there will be a nationwide feeling that we, the people, have made an input into the decision making. Consequently, whatever is our individual position on the matter, because there would have been this full airing on the matter, everybody more or less would now rally around the Prime Minister, whatever his conclusion is, and that would have the effect of binding the country together better to face this national survival challenge.
Mhm.
And that is what we, CCR, would like to do with you, our brother Ewart Layne and Ambassador Gill and the whole of the body politic. Thank you very much for having us.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Alexis. Thank you very much, Ali. Thank you
Thank
for
you
the
very much for having me
audience.
once again.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for all those who follow the program. We really apologize for the technical difficulties. But we really want to thank you and see you next week. Good night.